Breaking news today, social media is in a frenzy after the podcast, the PinoLanka Files, was allegedly faked. Theron and Leighton have decided not to comment at this time, and Rory is nowhere to be found, as per usual. What's up, y'all? My name is Leighton.
And I'm Theron.
Welcome to episode 2 of the PinoLanka Files. Today we will be covering the post-truth world and the implications it has. Mainly going to be focusing on social media, as maybe you realized through our intro. But let's get right into it. But before we do that, we gotta have our normal intro, of course. So, cue the intro.
Alright, so one of the first things I want to talk about regarding this film is the concept of media manipulation that is present throughout the film. As we understand, in the end of the film, Liu Li-min kind of sells out on the narrative that he had been building up throughout this entire film. Essentially, he deletes the file of video that would have given out the true culprit behind the murder case, which Liu Min had been working on throughout this entire film. So basically, to go back from the very beginning, Liu Li-min works at a news company with his wife, True News, and they set out to publish what is supposedly the truth. And in this journey, Liu Li-min ends up working with Zhang Zhengyi because he understands this case to be very controversial and also believes that this case could possibly give him more attention to his news channel. And so he starts working with Zhang Zhengyi, and as the story continues, we understand the actual case and we get to know more, uncovering this mystery. While this is happening, the media itself is getting a hold of the fact that Liu Li-min is on this case with Zhang Zhengyi, and the media itself has been portraying Liu Li-min as the bad guy. All the clicks and all the media coverage surrounding Liu Li-min during this is really negative, and you could see it specifically in this one scene where a lot of content creators are talking about Liu Li-min and Zhang Zhengyi, and their reactions to the case is very fake in the sense that these content creators are posing Liu Li-min as just a very, very terrible guy, even though he is just a news reporter just trying to figure out this case. This leads to the unfortunate twist at the end when Liu Li-min kind of figures out the case as much as he needs to in order to change the narrative that he is in fact the good guy.
So, I guess you could say that it's sort of like a full circle moment. I mean, we did kind of talk about it at the beginning. You kind of did a good recap of the overall story, the narrative, if you may. And we see this in real life too, people that, maybe initially promise to not sell out to the media, but, after a while, they end up having to do it, regardless of really what circumstances they're in. I can really think of one really good example of this would be with the presidential candidate Nikki Haley. So she is an American woman, but her ethnicity is Indian, and she has gone to the media before saying that she has felt that her race has been a factor, or she's been discriminated against because of her Indian heritage. However, in more recent years, she has talked about how she never has felt that Americans have been racist towards her. She's just kind of going with the flow, going with whatever the media wants her to do. And we can see this with Zhang Zhengyi and Liu Li-min, because he does do that as well. He initially is very critical of the media and how they manipulate the situation, but he ends up doing it at the very end to kind of save his own ass and save the validity or the truthfulness of his story. But in doing so, he makes his story or his news story less truthful. It's really just pure irony.
And you know what? This also reminds me of a story years ago. I don't know if you remember this, with the famous actor Jussie Smollett. Basically, yeah, exactly. So to generalize the story. Jussie Smollett is a very famous actor, and a few years ago, he kind of made this narrative about being a hate crime, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, and he posted it throughout social media and stuff, and it turned out to be all like a publicity stunt for no real reason. But Jussie Smollett is a very famous actor, and he has all this, for lack of better terms, clout. He has all this like control, and so when he talked about being hate crimed, everyone seemed to agree with him because like, what's the reason? We want to believe this guy, but this guy was very much just trying to manipulate the media to paint him in a better light. Because if I'm not mistaken too, he probably was also going through some controversies at the time too, which is why he kind of did this in a way to kind of save him, in the same way that Leo Lumin deletes the video in order to save himself from being viewed in any other way.
Yeah, I mean, with the Jussie Smollett case, actor on a very popular show at the time, he eventually got removed due to him being caught. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't necessarily because he was in controversy himself, but I think to get more popularity out of it. Any kind of news is good news. If you're trying to remain popular. And look, we're still talking about him to this day. Doesn't really have any acting opportunities anymore, but he kind of made his name out there. And Jong Joon-yi did the exact same thing. Of course, he never got caught, or the movie never really reveals if he does get caught deleting the files that would have implicated the grandmother as opposed to her grandson, who gets tragically killed by Jong Joon-yi. But with these cases in real life or in the movie, fame can happen regardless of if it's good or bad, and in most cases, any kind of fame is good fame. Well, it looks like there's a new section of the podcast. No, this is not the Rory Corner. That will be on here eventually. Rory's sitting right here next to me, waiting for his chance to speak. But right now, we're going to have an exclusive interview. Their voice will be altered just to protect their identity in the potential case that the FBI or the CIA or maybe the UN is listening to this podcast. Okay, so the interview will start now. If you just want to give yourself a basic introduction.
My name is...
Okay, well, for legal reasons, I'm going to have to bleep that name out so you don't get in any future trouble. But, yeah, just tell me your story.
So, I was a very rich and wealthy man in my time, but recently I was falsely accused of eating a Kit Kat the horizontal way.
Okay, that's f***ed up, but sorry, continue.
I was just sitting in my couch, man, and I looked at my phone and I saw it blowing up with, "How could you, man? How'd you eat a Kit Kat like that, man? You're a terrible human being. I don't want to talk to you anymore." And I lost my job. I lost my kids. I lost everything, man. It was not true. It is not true. I didn't eat a Kit Kat like that. I eat it normally. I break it apart and I eat them. I eat each of them.
So you have a break and you have a Kit Kat, but there were photos released of you eating it sideways. Is this some new form of AI technology? I mean, the photos are there. You were caught in 4K.
I did not do it. I did not do it. That is fake. That is fake. That is so AI, man. You don't understand. You can see the hands. The hands aren't real. They're like 7 fingers, dude. They're 7. That wasn't me. Those photos were fake.
So hello everybody, we're moving into the Rory Corner now, and what I want to discuss today is really focus in on, I should say, is the political aspect of the post-truth world. And in order to do that, I want to actually start by bringing up, a gentleman by the name of Walter Lippmann. He did a lot of work in sociology, and he also wrote extensively on politics and political theory of his time. And he lived from about 1889 to, I think, the 1970s. But in any case, the reason why he's relevant, is really for a few reasons. First, he actually ran propaganda and had a lot of experience with media going into or leading up to the United States entry into the First World War. And he himself was responsible for coordinating a lot of this manipulation. Later on, he ended up writing a work called The Phantom Public, in which he turned this into a critique of liberal democracy as a system in general. His view was that in a democracy where you have citizens voting on the matter of the day, or they're making decisions that could affect people half the world over, and yet they're doing so on information, assuming that they're literate, at his time. They're doing so on information, that they were getting, for a penny or for 5 cents, at a newspaper stand. And to him, this seemed really quite ludicrous, because, he had both experience with, the decision-making on one side and the fallibility of the electoral process, and of citizens, making decisions in these sorts of ways. And on the other side, he had experience with managing and manipulating what they were receiving and the kind of media that they were consuming in general. Now, the reason why this is relevant is because in post-truth world, what we see is a man who, obviously he's flawed in his own respect. We see him more or less lying from the beginning about certain things. Small things, but he's headed more or less in the right direction, His kind of, personal ambitions, they coincide with getting to the truth of this matter. And for a while, he continues with this, and he does very principled things. And then at a certain point, the principle seems to, if anything, override, just his merely personal ambitions. But then at the end, we see that he's, garnered such a large audience for himself that when he is finally confronted with the real truth of what actually happened, he turns away from it. That is the sort of end of the line for him. He defaults, if you will. And in post-truth world, what we see is a critique of information and media and journalism within democracies. We see corporate influence and the influence of extremely wealthy people. We see, the messiness of actually getting information, from the perspectives of the journalists themselves. And what, in a certain sense, I use this loosely, incentivizes or disincentivizes them to really get to the truth of things. And all of this is really quite scary, but what this critique, I think, makes room for is actually a very profound, playing field, if you will, or really a new sort of conception of what exactly to go for. And I think post-truth world actually contains this. And for that, I actually want to turn back to another contemporary of Walter Lippmann, a gentleman by the name of John Dewey. He was a political philosopher. He's often considered to be the philosopher of American democracy. And he's a fascinating figure, not just because he wrote for a time period over the span of 7 years, but because he focused in on directly what Lippmann, criticized and what he clarified in his critique, which were these fundamental flaws, these inadequacies, I should say, in the way that democracy functioned and the way that media existed within it. And what Dewey proposed was, in fact, that we should turn away from, a merely instrumental view of democracy, sort of no-holds-barred view, towards something which conceived of democracy as a sort of ethical conception, and that we should build our institutions around this. Now, post-truth world is brilliant as a critique of the failures of journalism in society, and in some sense of society itself and of its citizens. But what it makes room for is a more expansive understanding of democracy, and for beyond just merely commenting on the political transformations and more topical political topics, in Taiwan, of its time. It makes room for a broader conversation in terms of what democracy can look like, or what it should look like, and how the media should act within it. So with that, I'll conclude my talk.
Well, thank you, Rory, for that wonderful little segment. Again, kind of just in summation, media can be manipulated by the people. I mean, you can edit little sounds out. If someone says you can just kind of cross it off, or just cut it, split the audio files, split the video. AI with its it's increasingly becoming more and more like a human. I mean, it's scary. You see these videos on Instagram Reels and stuff. It's made by AI, and it looks real. And we do have one more thing to share, of course. So if you may or may not have heard, that interview was fake. It was done by us. We put a voice filter on. Maybe you guys figured that out. Maybe you didn't. I don't actually know. But here's one little trick. Not everything we said was said by us. We may or may not have used an AI to pretend to be us and talk about something. Or it was us. I'm not actually going to tell you. You'll just have to figure it out for yourself. But, my name's Layton.
My name's Theron.
Signing off. The outro is kind of the same as the intro, of course. So, Theron, if you want to say it.
Cue the outro.